97.3 ESPN.com. He is the host of the Coming In for a Landing podcast. It's Paul Hudrick right now on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. What's going on, Paul?
Just living, Mike. How about you?
The Friday is always fun, especially when the Eagles throw you a press conference that makes you scratch your head like crazy. But the Sixers back in action tonight. You can hear the game 8 o'clock on 97.3 ESPN. They take on the Timberwolves. And I guess, everybody's kind of looking back. Now, the Lakers lost again last night. They had the back-to-back. They lost to that Detroit team that the Sixers lost to the other day. So I guess we start to question a lot of things. Does losing to the Pistons mean as much? Does beating the Lakers mean it much? Like, this Friday night game is kind of like stuck in limbo of all these little, intricacies that happened since Monday. You lost to the Pistons. Then you beat the Lakers. Then the Lakers lost to the Pistons. It's just like been a weird, odd week for the Sixers.
Well, I think it's just been a weird, odd week weird, odd season for the entire NBA, just with everything going on. And the Pistons, they only have, I think, 5 wins, but they're against the Sixers, the Lakers, the Celtics, the Heat, and then one other elite team that I'm leaving out. So it's just, I think it's just a weird season. And that Detroit team, they're scrappy, man. I mean, they obviously don't have the talent level of a team like the Lakers or the Sixers, but they're scrappy. And it's also worth noting Lakers didn't have Anthony Davis last night. They did obviously have him against the Sixers. So it's a little bit different. Tonight's going to be a weird night too, because Joel Embiid is questionable. For the Timberwolves, Karl-Anthony Towns is out and D'Angelo Russell is questionable. So it could be another weird, wacky night for the Sixers. And I think it's just, with this season, as much as we normally have to roll with the punches with a long season, I think this season especially is going to be weirder than any we've experienced.
Yep, and then obviously, so they beat the Lakers the other night. We didn't get a chance to talk to you after that game, but Joel monstrous in that game. But really the big shot from Tobias Harris, and I guess that really sparks a lot of thoughts. Can Tobias be that Batman to Joel's Robin and let Ben be the third guy? Do we start to look at Tobias differently because he made that shot?
I think it's not even just that shot. I think it's his season as a whole. And when you look back on when they made the decision to re-sign Tobias, the idea was Joel Embiid is your guy. He's your go-to scorer. And that you wanted Tobias to be the complement. Because, listen, Ben Simmons is probably never going to be a 20-plus point a game guy. That's just not his game. And, Mike, I think you've made the excellent point that, he doesn't have to be. Michael Jordan had Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman. They didn't have to have that. They didn't have to be that guy in order for that team to have success because they had Michael Jordan. Well, in this team, you have Joel Embiid, who's arguably been the best player in the NBA this year. So, Tobias, if he can just add that complementary scoring, and then, like you said, Ben Simmons can be that facilitator. He can be that defensive player of the year type player. There's a formula there that I think can work, but it requires Tobias Harris to play at this level all season long. He doesn't have to score 30 points a game, but if he can get you around 20, be really efficient, be teetering around that 50, 40, 90 mark, if he can be that guy, there is a formula there that I think can work for them that can lead to them being one of the top-tier teams in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, there's a quick stat that I saw today that kind of eye-popping, is that the Sixers starting 5 hits on 45% of three-pointers on passes from Ben Simmons. It just shows you how open they get because of him. 45% when he is not on the court. That number drops to 29%. So it shows the importance. And assisted three-pointers made this year, he is number 1 in the league with 76 assists that have led to three-point baskets. So this kind of goes to, if he scores 11, but he dishes out 11 assists and they end up being three-pointers, I don't care where you get the points from, just get them. But will that hold up in the playoffs, I guess, remains to be seen.
Yeah, 100%. That's with Ben Simmons his whole career. That's what it's been, okay, well, let's see what happens in the playoffs. Last year we didn't get to see it in the playoffs because obviously he had the injury. But it's going to come down to, that was a great game he played, like against the Lakers. I think that was, again, when we talk about that blueprint, that formula, I think that was it to a T. It was Joel Embiid was going to get the ball, early and often. Then as you saw the Lakers be way more aggressive, plus I think the back affected Joel later in that game as well. But then you saw Tobias step up in the scoring role. You saw Ben, when he had the opportunities in the fast break, he took them. When he had the opportunities to get to the rim, he took those and he scored. So I think that was kind of the best version of all of it. But yeah, with Ben Simmons, that version is great. The way he played against the Lakers, I thought that was it was close to perfect. That's what you want out of him against elite teams. But can he do that against elite teams in the playoffs is definitely going to be the question. And there's going to be other tests down the road, when they play the Brooklyn Nets, when they play the Miami Heat again, when they're at full strength, when they play the Celtics, when they're at full strength, how will he look then? So there are going to be tests along the way, but the measuring stick is always, it's going to be, can he do it against elite competition in the playoffs? And there is a formula that can work, but will it work? We have to wait and see.
Yeah, the big run that the Lakers made down the stretch, do you correlate Ben Simmons having to be hanging around in that dunker spot and maybe some of the sloppy offense with that Lakers run, or is it not so much, that being a big input? Because I think about you mentioning the playoff Ben, and is that something you're going to have to utilize in playoff moments? Ben hanging around that dunker spot in those areas, and I'm just trying to see if the two correlated.
Yeah, I do. I think not only just the dunker spot, I think him in pick and rolls and him setting screens. I think that's been, and I know that's not the sexiest thing in the world is to say, hey, he's really good at setting screens, but he is. He's really good at setting screens, and he's really good at at finding soft spots in the defense. You've seen when Joel Embiid has gotten double teams, he's done a better job at finding those little soft spots around the rim. Joel Embiid has kind of been, as much as he has improved as a passer, I think every once in a while maybe he's missed him on those little cuts and those little duck-ins, but I think that the Lakers run, like the run they went on in that fourth quarter, is twofold. I think it's one, they are the Lakers. They are a championship caliber team. They have the best player on the planet, and they have another elite, arguably top 5 talent on their team with Anthony Davis. And then I think it's the Sixers had a big lead and they took their foot off the gas. I don't think it's necessarily about Ben Simmons and where he was on the floor at that point. I think it was just the game. I think it was, like I said, the Lakers being great, the Sixers taking their foot off the gas, and I thought instead of really being aggressive offensively, I thought that they were just trying to run the clock out and hoping that would work, and I thought that was a really poor strategy, to be honest with you. But yeah, I mean, these are going to be questions that are going to have to be answered. I think there is a role in the half court with Ben Simmons, and I don't think it's necessarily initiating the offense. I think it's more being in that dunker spot, setting screens, rolling to the basket, cutting, and finding those little soft spots on duck-ins. I think that's the role in clutch moments in half-court offense. That's where you want to see him.
Hey, Paul, what did you think of Danny Green the other night when he was asked about Ben Simmons playing with Joel Embiid? I thought that was kind of an interesting, telling answer a little bit.
Yeah, Danny Green, since he's gotten here, has been a big proponent of pushing Ben Simmons to say, hey, I think you need to shoot more. I think you can do it. I think you just have to do it in games. And Danny's response when he was asked specifically, hey, like, have you? Because Danny Green has had so much success playing around all-star players and, Hall of Fame players for that matter, has he talked to Ben about how he can fit in around Joel Embiid? And Danny Green's response was, well, I think that Ben should force us to play around him sometimes because he can be that good, especially when there's a situation where they are aggressively double-teaming Joel Embiid or where a matchup just really happens to favor Ben Simmons. And Danny Green pointed to the fact that, late in that game, Dennis Schroeder was on Ben Simmons. If Dennis Schroeder is on Ben Simmons, that's a clear and present mismatch that maybe they should have taken advantage of that they didn't. Now, is that coaching? Maybe a little bit. Is that on Ben Simmons? Maybe a little bit. Is that on the team around him for maybe not recognizing that? I think it's all a factor. But I do think Danny Green's comments were interesting and pointed. And I think, the fact that Ben Simmons has Danny Green pushing him, that he has Sam Cassell pushing him, these are all positive things. And I think it allows Doc Rivers to almost play a little bit of that good cop role. Because we see in public, he says nothing but glowing things to say about Ben Simmons. So I think there's a little bit of that good cop, bad cop role that some of these guys play with him. And I think it's worked so far.
What did you think of the multi-option play Doc Rivers called to get Tobias that shot? He actually gave Danny Green a ton of praise for reading it right just from the start.
Yeah, I think, it was a very similar play to what they called at the end of the Memphis game. It didn't work out because Tobias Harris got too deep on that play and then winds up stepping on the baseline, and that causes a turnover. But I like it because I liked the initial look of getting Seth Curry in that pick and roll, and then that switch happens where you get Tobias on Caruso and not LeBron, and Tobias is 6'8", so he could just elevate over Caruso, just a couple dribbles to his left and just elevates right over top of him. Whereas if that's LeBron, that shot's not even an option. Or if they do switch it a different way and maybe it gives Seth Curry an open look, I do think it was a good optionality look because clearly the Lakers are going to be focusing on Joel Embiid. There was no way they wanted Joel Embiid to get the ball in the post to try to beat them. So I thought it was a good layered play. I thought Tobias had the hot hand, so it wasn't, it's good to put him in a situation where he does have that option. And then ultimately it comes down to Tobias being so confident and playing at such a high level that he was able to make that shot.
All right, Paul Hudrick, don't forget Sixers and the T-Wolves tonight. You can hear the game on 97.3 ESPN. It starts at 8 p.m. It's an 8 p.m. tip tonight. And as Paul mentioned, Karl Anthony Towns and most likely D'Angelo Russell. So it's not going to be a full squad for the Timberwolves, but we'll see how the Sixers rebound. Do you anticipate Embiid playing tonight? Not that we've seen anything, but he did take that fall, and they're missing a couple. Maybe this is one of those nights because you do have a busy week, including a back-to-back coming up.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, I learned a long time ago to never, ever speculate on Joel Embiid being questionable and whether he's going to play or not, because it always seems to be the opposite. So I will say that the fact that he traveled seems encouraging, because if they already knew he wasn't going to play, he wouldn't even have gone to Minnesota. So the fact that he's there, I think, is a positive. We're going to talk to Doc Rivers, in a couple hours, and I think we'll get a little bit more of a clearer idea of whether or not he'll play. I do think, Mike, that there is something to the idea of, Karl Anthony Towns isn't playing. There's a chance D'Angelo Russell isn't playing. This is, I mean, the other night it should have been a team they should have beat with the Pistons too, but this is a team they should be able to beat. They have to avoid that letdown because, coming off of such a big win, they had to be ready and focused to play a team that's not as good. So, I think there is definitely a precedent for him not to play, but we'll see. We'll see how the back's feeling. Again, the fact that he made the trip seems encouraging in that regard, but still very much up in the air.
And I think we all want to see the aggression of Ben Simmons tonight. Is he going to be laid back, Ben, and he just lets everybody else kind of do the thing? Or is he going to fire it up and get 15, 17, 18 points and play an aggressive game? That will be the story that I'm watching tonight, and you can hear it all right here on 97.3 ESPN. He's at Paul Hudrick. Follow him on Twitter for more. Make sure you listen to the latest edition of Coming In for a Landing, the podcast. He talks with Amy Fadul. It's a good conversation on the Sixers. Check that out. At Paul Hudrick on Twitter is where you can find it. And, of course, he'll be back on Monday to recap inside the Sixers weekend here on the Sports Bash. All right, Paul, take care, man.
You too, Mike. Thanks, man.
All right, there you go. Paul Hudrick, great stuff. And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.